So welcome everyone, good afternoon. My name is Krista Riley and I'm a pedagogical counselor in the Pedagogical Support and Innovation Office at Vanier. And I'll begin this session with Vanier's land acknowledgement. So we can acknowledge that the place in which we work and study is situated within the unceded lands of the Ganyangahaga or Mohawk peoples, part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. There's also a strong historic presence of Anishinaabe peoples in what is now known as the Greater Montreal area. Jojage or Montreal has also long been and continues to be a gathering place for many First Peoples from all directions. We honor and thank the traditional custodians of this land, and we strive to work for the success of future generations. Furthermore, we cannot have an acknowledgement without a commitment to action. At Vanier College, we're striving to remain engaged in the process of conciliation by incorporating all principles of the Indigenous Education Protocol in our current strategic plan. We will continue to work for the success of future generations of students from all backgrounds. So welcome to Vanier's International Women's Week. This year's theme is family. Before we begin this talk, Vanier's Women and Gender Studies Committee would like to thank the Ministère de l'Éducation et de l'Enseignement Supérieur, the Vanier College Administration, the Faculty of Arts, Business and Social Science, Vanier's Communications and Corporate Affairs Office, the VCTA, the Open Door Network, the Indigenous Studies Program, Vanier's Student Services, Vanier's Financial Services Office, and Vanier's Department of Communications, Media, and Students and Studio Arts for their financial and administrative support, as well as Dawson's Peace Center. Also big thanks to David and Carlos in the back for helping with all the various tech issues. And a shout out to Leila Bader, who organized this amazing series of events this whole week. For those who are joining us on Zoom, if you won't be able to chat with each other during the presentation, but if you would like to ask any questions during or after the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box, which you can access by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom window. So I will now introduce our guest. Nina Segalowitz is Inuvialuit and Chippewayan from Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. She's a well-known artist and community leader, and she will speak to us about her artistic journey and what it has meant to share this journey with her daughter. I'm very excited to hear her talk, so without further ado, I will welcome Nina.
Thank you so much. I'm really, really proud and honored to have been chosen to be a panelist. I can't see any of you. All I can see is my screen. So mind you, I've been practicing during pandemic on how to speak to a screen. So, it's nice to see, oh, there you are. I see the auditorium. Thank you so much. That helps a lot. Hi, hello, hi. So I'm actually calling in from Algonquin territory. I'm actually presently in Ottawa, Northwest Territories. My birth mother is from Inuvik, and my birth father is from Treaty 8, Alberta. So I'm Inuvialuit and Dene. And I'm really looking forward to sharing with you a little bit about my journey and also having good questions and answers. So I want to just share a little bit about how I came to live in Montreal. So right now I'm living on the South Shore of Montreal, but I grew up in a very Orthodox Jewish area of Montreal. It's called Outremont, and it's got there. And just so that you understand what music has come to be for me and my family and my kids, and so you understand the significance too of the struggle it has been to reclaim the music and the songs that I do sing. So like I said, I'm originally from Fort Smith. Both my biological families come from my biological family. So my mother and my father both went to residential school. My mother, Margaret Thrive, were forced to go to residential school. And my father comes from a family of 10, and they also all went to residential school. My mother had 7 children. Now, what happened was, I know residential school and that era is now being more and more talked about. What is being less talked about is the 60 scoop, which is the assimilation policy after residential school, because the government saw that we were going back home and we were becoming reconnected with our community and relearning our language. And so what they did was, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, what we call it the 60s group, they would go into our homes, to the hospitals and schools, to go and take our children without consent and forcibly take them away, and then have them adopted across Canada as a way to permanently assimilate us. And some of us were actually sold in newspapers. I met a 60 Scoop survivor who, her ad was, you have a chance to give this Indian child a better chance in life. You can get her for $100. And so the parents who ended up adopting us, my parents specifically, did not know that I was stolen. And there were 7 of us, and each of us were stolen and put across Canada. One of the things that is really important to understand is that when I was forcibly taken, not only did I lose connection with my mother and my father, I also lost connection to my elders. So my grandmother, my grandfathers, my aunties, all those members of my family who would have traditional ceremony, how to hunt, how to fish, how to do all those things. I lost that connection. So it wasn't just a mother that was losing a daughter, it was a daughter losing her brothers and sisters, losing her connection to the land, because I grew up in Montreal. I didn't grow up on the land. So for me, I was taken when I was 9 months old. My parents had brought me to the hospital in Fort Smith for an ear infection. And in residential school, like, they didn't really teach. Parents were not very much illiterate. And so when it came to signing admission papers for the hospital, my parents were asked to sign. They said, well, don't worry, you can get Anne Marie back tomorrow. Now, Anne Marie is my birth name, Anne Marie Thrasher. And so my mother left and my father left, and they came back the next morning. And when they came back to come get me, I was gone. And the nurse and the doctor told my mother that because she was Eskimo, because she did not know how to raise her own kids, that was the reason why they thought it would be a lot better for me to be raised in the South. I was very much devastated. And she kept going back to the hospital day after day after day, hoping that I would be there. Now, my journey brought me from Fort Smith to, I believe, Inukjuak to Montreal. And it was a social worker and a nurse that flew with me. And I ended up in the Jewish Family Services in Montreal. But today it's called Batshaw. But back then it was the English side, and it was run by the Jewish Family Services. Mm. And so what ended up happening, excuse me. You're all probably really happy that I'm virtual right now. I'm just sneezing. Springtime is wreaking havoc on my system. So yeah, so I was in the Jewish Family Services, and a lot of us Indigenous babies were adopted into Jewish families in Montreal. And so that's Jewish Canadian, is Jewish Canadian. He's still with us. And my mother was from the Philippines, and they were both professors at Concordia University, and they were looking to adopt. And so when they were flipping through the book of pictures of kids to adopt, they fell upon my picture. And of course, I was the cutest one. And that's why they picked me. But there was a connection that they made in right before my 1 year, before I turned a year old. And this month actually happens to be my birth month. My birthday is at the end of March. So this month is usually a very emotional month for me because it's a celebration of my birth, but it's also a celebration of me having been taken away. Now, in terms of music, when I grew up, I grew up with a younger sister. She was born after I was adopted. And having professors as parents, my father played piano and my mother played the flute. And education was a really important thing for me. Like, it wasn't something that was pushed on me, but it was kind of assumed that I would end up at Concordia. It was kind of like at my house, there was constantly parties with PhD students in psychology. My father was taught cognitive psychology, and my mother taught linguistics at Concordia. So there's a story in my family that when I was about 3, I was carrying around like a manila folder, because at the time my mother was doing her thesis in linguistics. And so I, being 3 or 4-year-old, I wanted to be like my mom. So I had these papers in a manila envelope, and they were asking what I was doing. They asked, "What are you doing with that?" It was my thesis. And so it was instilled in me that education was really important. Alongside of that, music was very important. At the age of 3, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Suzuki Method, but it's a learning method by David Suzuki, who's from Japan. And you start children at a very young age. And so my parents wanted to encourage anything and everything. They first started me off in violin when I was 3 years old. And maybe 6 months, or maybe not even 3 months. And because our lessons were next door at the McGill Music Conservatory. And I fell in love with the cello. And I kept running away to the cello lesson. My mom would always find me over there instead of my violin lessons. So I started with a really small cello, and I had lessons from the age of 3 to 16. And for me, the music was really a safe place for me. A lot of times people ask me, well, how was it in your adoptive family? How was it as parents? And it must have been wonderful. And for the most part, yeah, it was, I got to Live in China in Beijing for a year with my mother teaching linguistics over there. I traveled Europe. I took the Trans-Siberian train from Beijing to Moscow. Back then it was the USSR, but we won't go into that right now. But what people didn't understand was that there was abuse going on behind closed doors. And for me, music was a way to express everything that I was seeing. My grandfather and uncle were abusing me sexually. And it really affected me, my mental health, and it really affected my relationship with my family. But music was always that constant. You know, the music was a way for me to like, I would go to summer camp, and so music was a real safe haven. You know, that's where I saw healthy relationships. That's where I had male mentors who were really healing and protective of me. And I also learned that, you know, in my musical class and my classes on Friday, I was as a, you know, who I was as a Native woman. All I knew was that I was Eskimo at the time, because until I was the age of 18, I didn't meet another Native person. That it really didn't matter who I was. You know, that music was really an international language, you know, and I was able to express myself, and people saw and her listened to me playing cello, and just saw me as a cellist as opposed to, you know, um, so I experienced a lot less racism actually, you know, and it was a safe haven. To the age of 18, you know, growing up in the 70s and 80s, Native people, Indigenous people, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis people were not at the forefront of anything besides the news about us being, you know, alcoholics or, you know, homeless, or uh, there was nothing really positive. You know, one of the things that my friend just recently reminded me of was, sorry, I thought I was hiding myself blowing my nose, and you guys totally saw that. One of my friends actually we were talking about this yesterday about role models in public. And all of us remember as Indigenous kids seeing Buffy St. Marie on Sesame Street breastfeeding her child. And it was one of those things that I just thought, wow, there's this beautiful woman who kind of looks like me, you know, like, and she's Native. And I kind of thought, wow, because up until that point, growing up, all I saw were those vignettes of Canadian heritage with like Eskimos living in igloos and like hunting fish and stuff. And so there was no celebration like there is today. And um, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis contemporary art and creation, and we have our own television channel and our radio stations. All those things were not yet visible at the time, and so my parents at the time were not encouraged to have me be part of the community. So until at the age of 18, I thought being an Eskimo meant building igloos in my front yard in Utrimo, along with the Hasidic kids that were outside. And all along, I thought I was Jewish. Like I went to church with my grandmother on my mother's side, and I spoke a little bit of Tagalog, and so I just thought, you know, I was just like, they would see me as this Jewish kid, but obviously I'm not. So I would build igloos in my front yard in Utrimo. And I was very proud of myself because I thought, well, now I'm a real Eskimo, you know, but that's all I knew. I had no idea about the beauty of what our community and our um, our abilities were until I was 18, and I went to the Friendship Center in Montreal. Back then, it was on Côte des Neiges. There's a sense of fear, you know, having experienced racism and not completely understanding it because people thought I was Chinese, and uh, I was kind of like, no, I'm not Chinese. Not that there's anything wrong with being Chinese, but I wasn't Chinese. I was Inuit. I was Eskimo at the time in the 70s. And so, but I didn't have, I always felt like I never fit in, you know. And so when I first approached my community at the Native Friendship Center of Montreal, I was terrified. White world, I understood that because I was different and but what happens if my own community doesn't accept me? Then where do I go from there? So I was terrified. I really was. Um, but I took my courage and I went and I opened the door at the Friendship Center, and there was this woman who was sitting in the center, I mean in the entrance, and she turned and looked at me, and I just got chills. Now I know her name. But at the time she turned and looked at me, and let me tell you, for the first time, to be able to look at somebody who resembles you, like she had the same skin and she had the same eyes and the hair, and she was like built like me, and it was one of those moments that just healed my this hole that I had been feeling and looking to fill since I was, you know, because I grew up knowing I was adopted, but I just like I was like a sponge, and I was like taking everything in. And one of the things that I really kind of held on to was this music, you know, as I loved music from a child. And so for the first time when I was listening to hand drum singing, the first time I heard Inuit throat singing live, it just, you know, it just settled me like nothing had ever settled me. And so that first sound of throat singing of it just was like, what is this sound? Like, where does this come from? You know, and immediately I needed to learn how to do it. I really was like, okay, if there's nothing else in my life that I do besides get my bachelor's degree, I'm going to learn how to throat sing. Mm. So, um, I thought, okay, so uh, and at that age, I had been going to Dawson to do social work, and my studies kind of suffered a little bit because I got derailed while I was hanging out at the Friendship Center. I discovered um, that a lot of our community members would go and hang out at this bar downtown in Montreal. And because I wanted to really be a part of something, I tagged along, and uh, I started drinking. I had never drank because my parents didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I didn't, you don't cross unless there's a green light. And so that's how I lived. But because I had this desire so much of wanting to be seen and accepted, I decided to go along. And so at the age of 18 or 19, I started to drink on the weekends. But I couldn't understand it because the women and the men who were teaching me traditional things during the day were also fighting each other at night. And I didn't understand at the time the intergenerational impact. Understand that a lot of our members in our community who don't have addresses, who prefer to stay on the streets because they're not isolated and they get to see their aunts and their uncles, are the ones who suffered in residential school. But I kind of realigned myself. I met my husband and when I was 20, and I got married at 22. But I still had this feeling in the back of my head that I needed to learn how to throat sing. And so I decided college degree. So I was going to Vanier College at nighttime, finishing, I think, humanities and English or something. And so Vanier was a part of me moving forward and getting a formal education. And at the same time, I was going to night school at Vanier. I was going full-time at Concordia. And I did I ended up doing my applied human relations. But one of the magical things that happened when I was going to university was I met Takalik Partridge. And Takalik Partridge is another Inuk woman who was also, and so when I met her, she was studying biology or chemistry. She was very, very smart. She still is, but she's, at the time I was like, holy heck, you're studying biology. And so when we struck up a friendship, we immediately like connected and we went to go learn how to throat sing. And it first started out as this way to learn. People say, well, how do you learn how to throat sing? And back in the day, back in the 90s, we didn't have like MP3s or like Apple Music. We had cassette tapes. I know, right? I know. Cassette tapes, right? But our friend Evie Mark, who's also an incredible throat singer, gave us a cassette tape and said, come back when you've learned these songs. And that's another thing too, is that traditionally how we teach or how we learn a skill, whether it's hunting or fishing or sewing or throat singing or how to make comics, how to make or umiak, which is our bigger boats, it's self motivated. So if I wanted to learn how to throat sing, I would go and sit with an elder who knew how to throat sing or a woman who knew how to throat sing, and I would sit with her long enough to learn how to practice. It was never imposed. And it wasn't like I sat in a classroom and listened and took notes. It was really, I had to go and search. So So what we ended up doing was putting the cassette in whatever cassette player, and we were sitting next to the speaker, and we were trying to differentiate. I don't know if I can see you, but how many of you have ever heard throat singing live or watched a tape or a video? Awesome. You guys are so awesome. You guys rock. Holy heck. So when you listen to throat singing, you can't always tell who's singing, right? So we were like next to the speaker going, okay, what is that sound? Who's making that sound? Because it sounds like one person is doing that, and the other one's going, but it's actually the same woman doing the same sound and just repeating like Frere Jacques. So one woman starts and the other one. And what I found out too, and so if someone was wearing a parka or mittens that I wanted, I would be like, okay, I'm going to throat sing with you. And whoever laughs first is the not winner. Like, I don't like saying loser. Uh, uh, it's just not nice. So my friend was like, just call them not winners. So whoever was the not winner would lose the game. And they would have to give me the mittens. And so the first woman who laughs, the first woman who can change rhythm and change notes and to trip up the other woman. So, and the throat songs are a repertoire that are songs that have been sung for thousands of years. And there's this visceral reaction that people have to throat singing that I understand, because the first time I learned or heard throat singing live, I had like chills up and down my arms and my body, and I just thought, wow. And the sounds that we make are actual around us. So we have the river, we have the saw, we have the goose, we have there's one that goes and it's actually the imitation of somebody icing their hamutik, their sled. So it's because hamutiks, our sleds were very that they were an essential part of our survival, because that's how we traveled, that's how we followed the caribou. And unfortunately, during the 1950s, the government decided that they needed to, during the Cold War, they needed to show that Canada, the north of Canada, which was close to Russia, was populated by Canadians. And so what they did was, back until then, up until that point, Inuit were not very much looked at by the government, because we just kind of wandered and we kept to ourselves, and they didn't have any use for us until the Cold War. But the problem was that we kept leaving on our hamutik, on our, and our dogs were a part of our protection. So in a blizzard, they would be able to bring us home. They would warn us against polar bears. Children were raising the puppies from the time that they were small till adulthood as a way to show them responsibility. The men were very close to their dogs, because the dogs ensured their ability to provide food for the families. And so, but because the Canadian government in Ottawa, they were, afraid of the Cold War. What they did was they sent up RCMP officers, and and they showed up in airplanes, and they came off the airplanes with their guns and uniform, and uh, they told everybody who had puppies to gather all the puppies and dogs in the corner, and they shot them. And what happened was, without any explanation, so the men were completely devastated because they no longer were able to provide for their families. And that completely changed our throat singing. When I sing that song of, it's a reminder for me of a way of life that was decimated. But it's also for me a way to say how resilient we are. You know, throat singing, when the church went up north, was deemed part of the devil. A lot of the sounds that we make are very guttural. And these sounds were sexualized by the priests, and it kind of stirred up in them sexual feelings. And so, and they wanted to erase who we were and replace it with Catholic, the Catholic religion. And so throat singing went underground, and we would do it in secret. And the elders would sing and still teach in secret. But if anyone was found teaching throat singing, they would be put in jail. So throat singing for me has not only been about finding out who I am, that separation, that break with my biological family. It's been about holding songs that have been part of who we are for thousands of years that we almost lost. It's a way, like, so I have two girls. So my daughter, Ulukayak, her English name is Sierra, she's 21. And I have a littler one who's 11. Her name is Khilamayok, which means from the heavens, and her English name is Nevea. And so for me, when people hear about my story and they're like, I'm so sorry that I would be so mad. And I was, and I do get mad when I think about it, but I can't stay there or else they win. The government wins, the social workers win. I can't stay in that hatred. I can't stay in that sadness. I can't stay in that grief. I have to use who I am to move forward. And so learning, and I mean, having my girls learn throat singing for me has been a major way of demonstrating that we're not gone, that they didn't win. And to hear, because they've been listening to throat singing since they were in my bell. Like, people ask them, are you proud that you throat sing? And they're just like, well, I've been listening to throat sing all my life. And that answer for me heals me more than anything in this world. Because now I know I've done my job. I can leave this earth knowing that my girls know who they are, you know, and that break that the government wanted, and that dislocation and that relocation and all those things that they tried to do to assimilate me and others, didn't work. And it's still something that like just recently, actually this Saturday, my daughter, my youngest one, did her first gig. She throat sang with me for a TV episode, and it was her first time ever doing that in public. And I'm so proud of her, because, and I'm so glad that my girls don't have to wonder who they are. Also, throat singing is something in a contemporary sense, I don't know, contemporary sense. And that's another thing too that throat singing for me has allowed me to do, is hold discussions about throat singing, and the fact that as Inuit people, that's like a, you know, Inuit means people. So as Inuit, we're contemporary, and we adapt. We went from the igloo to the internet in 50, 60 years. And we're unlike First Nations in the fact that we haven't had contact since 250 years. It's been only 50. So we've had to adapt. We've had to learn how to adapt to modern world, and you know, but throat singing, like I've sang with the Montreal Symphony Orchestra. I've been to France, in Paris, to throat sing at conferences. I've met the Queen of Belgium. And it's not to brag, but it's to say how far we've come as people, as Inuit, in terms of being at the forefront now, and celebrated as for who we are. And I've done beatboxing and throat singing. I have sang with Bobby McFerris. I recently was on this show called Belly Bum, which is going to air in March or April, because we're contemporary, and throat singing for me is a way to open that dialogue of who we are as Inuit, that we're not just coats in a museum, or that we're not just soapstone carvings at tourist shop. We're not just alcoholics that you see. We're and we're going to university, and we're, you know, it's a reminder, and it's to show that we're evolving along with everybody else. You know, yeah, we have our social problems, but there's social issues everywhere. And for me, throat singing has been a way of healing that. And I don't know, I wanted to touch on my Dene side and share a little bit about Dene healing and drumming and stuff, but I know it's like 3:13. Do I have time to share a little? If you just raise your.
Ina?
No, I could. Oh, now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I was just saying, like, the final cutoff is 3:40, 3:45, 3:50.
Okay, the Dene songs.
You wanted to do that? Sure, of course. Whatever you like. You
And
use
then
the time.
and then I can open it up for questions, which is what I enjoy the most.
Okay, sure. As you wish. As you wish.
Okay. So so that's on my mother's side. So my Inuvialuit side is, we have our songs. You know, throat singing is not necessarily, like, the songs that I've learned have been songs from Nunavik, Northern Quebec, and Nunavut style. And Inuvialuit hand drum, they usually have like dances, and there's just styles of songs. And so on the other side is my father, the Dene side. And for a long time, I didn't know about that side. I knew about the Eskimo side, but now when I found out who I was, and who my father was, his name was George Vermillion. He was Dene from Fort Smith. And he was actually, I'm only understanding now that he was an incredible sorry. He was an incredible member of the community, and he was one of the elders on the elders council. And I didn't know. I can see the audience, yes. So when I started learning about who I was, I loved the hand drum songs and I loved the powwow songs. And the first time I heard a powwow song, I was just like, I wanted to be next to it. I wanted to, you know, but again, that feeling of imposter common among adoptees or those who were raised in the foster care system or through child services. And so it took me a long time to kind of find my voice and to feel that I was allowed to throat sing. I mean, allowed to do some hand drum songs. And one of the differences is that throat singing is not ceremonial, which is a question we get a lot as singers. Is it ceremonial? Is it like mantra? Is it like, and it's totally not that. It's just like a pastime. It's like, you know, it's not ceremonial at all. But hand drum songs can be ceremonial songs. There are certain songs that are sung in public, at events, in groups, at community events, at community celebrations, and there are ceremonial songs that are not shared publicly with either non-Indigenous people or only the ones that are in ceremony get to hear it, and no one can sing those songs unless an elder has given you permission to. Oh, and that's another question people ask me, if they can learn how, unless you're another Inuk woman, because the elders have given us direction that we are still trying to heal from it being outlawed. We are still trying to have our women learn. And so we always say, can you just give us a minute? Like, can we have a minute to heal our community? And our land was taken, our language was taken, our ceremonies were taken, everything was taken. And right now we're in a healing process. So can we just have a minute? So right now the elders have said no, and I respect that. And so I don't give class with other Inuit women. The same thing with drumming. There's a lot of people that want to learn how to hand drum. What people don't understand is that the songs that we sing in public were songs that we were put in jail for. The songs that people want to learn and be taught are songs that we were put in jail for. Because it was illegal. Decreed by Ottawa that our songs, our ceremonies, sage, everyone's sage, everyone has dream catchers, everyone is like, we're a la mode right now, like there's an openness of who we are, but there's also a lot of like taking bits and pieces of who we are and running with it without really understanding medicine, But the songs that we sang also had to go underground. The songs that I sing were sung underground because it was outlawed. We were not allowed to sing our songs. We were not allowed to speak our languages. My father and my mother their family members, their brothers and sisters, tongues being burnt with a hot poker for speaking their language, let alone singing their songs. The nuns and the priests would put a hot poker in the fire and punish the kids for speaking their language, you know? And so there's a certain sense of resentment when people come and try to learn our songs, because a generation ago, my parents were not allowed to sing the songs that people all of a sudden have access to, you know. And songs and singers, you know. Like there's songs that I sing that are very dear to my heart because they remind me of the people who have either passed on or who are no longer around me, who have traveled across Canada and we're not close. But every time I sing their songs that they taught me, I think of them, you know. And so learning how to use a hand drum has also been a way for me to heal and to kind of take my space. I've sang at like missing and murdered Indigenous women marches for all our All Children Matter, the one with the orange shirt day, residential school day. And so for me, like I began my journey with music being something that gave me a safe place to be when I was being abused at home, and a way to celebrate my skills and my talent and but it has moved from including throat singing and hand drum that have a lot more deeper meaning for me and my kids. You know, my kids also, for me, it's been a way to transition, you know, from being someone who was lost and searching for themselves and identity to really kind of feeling good in my skin. You know, you see, I have tattoos, and that's something that I did in October, because now I feel safe walking around in public with my tunit. They're called tunit and kakinit, are markings. And these are traditional markings that have private. 10 years ago, I would have not felt safe to walk around in public. But now there is this opening of awareness and interest, respectful interest, and not just seeing us as specimens in a museum, but rather people to understand and to learn about our history, because it's not like the history of residential school and the 60s group is not our history alone. It's Canada's history. It's your history. You know, right now you're standing and sitting in an auditorium that is on unceded Mohawk territory. And we do this land acknowledgement that was never there, you know, unceded anything. You know, government was very, and colleges and the educational system and pretty much everyone was very reluctant and refused to acknowledge that whose territory we were on. But we've come a long way. And especially since last May, when our children were found at residential school and they were being unearthed and their truth was being brought to light, literally. Canadians all of a sudden had had a shock. We've known for hundreds of years that, you know, we knew that our children were buried there. But now so did Canadians. And so there's an incredible amount of openness and respect and inclusion of our history and our truth. And having been invited to this panel, I jumped at the chance when Miss Bader invited me, because for me, it was if I have a chance to share my truth, but also to show resilience and the resilience of the next generation, and has been and still is like I've worked as a social worker for 25 years in Montreal, and I've seen the change, but I also see that a lot of the same issues, so there's still a lot of growth to happen. But sharing my story with you all sitting in the auditorium, I'm hoping that I know for sure that you and me, um, and moments like this is where change is happening the most. We're not waiting for the Minister of Education to, you know, other things that in our histories, but you are taking control of that, and the truth can't be hidden anymore because of social media. Wet'suwet'en, people knew about Wet'suwet'en immediately. There was live feed on Facebook about what was going on when we were demonstrating for the pipelines. There's like so much things that are happening at a faster pace, and I'm really thankful for the time that I was talk about how music has healed my family. That and to share that Vanya was a big part of me advancing in my education. And I just wanted to share a song. I was going to sing a Denny Healing song, but because it's being recorded, I won't, because it can't be recorded, the song. But I will sing a song from my friend Viola Day. She doesn't live in Montreal anymore, but she was a big part of encouraging me to get my voice going. I don't know how good I'll be because I'm fighting a cold. And if you'll indulge me, I'm going to sing a song, and then I'll take questions. Yeah. I'm using a rattle that I have, and it's Mohawk style, Haudenosaunee style rattle. Oh, bueno, ah, bueno, hey, 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 yo, hey, hey, ho, hey, hey, ho. Hey, eh, oh, oh, hey, eh, eh. Hey, eh, oh, oh, hey, eh, eh. Hey, hi, ya, hey, eh, oh, oh, bueno, hey. Hey, hi, ya, hey, eh, oh, oh, bueno, hey, ho. Oh, bueno, ah, bueno, hey, hey. Hey, yo, hey, hey, ho, hey, hey. Ho. Oh, oh, hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, oh, oh, hey, hey, hey. Hey, hi, ya, hey, hey, oh, oh, bueno, hey. Hey, hi, ya, hey, hey, oh, oh, bueno, hey. Oh, bueno, ah, bueno, hey, hey. Hey, yo, hey, hey, ho, hey, hey, ho. Way, oh, oh, hey, way, oh, oh, hey, hey, hi, ya, hey, oh, oh, hey, hi, ya, hey, oh, oh, ah, bueno, hey, 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 yo, hey, hey, ho, hey, hey, ho. So that's the end of my presentation. We got like 50, hey, on the dot. Look at that. 15 minutes for any kind of questions or comments. I want to thank Layla and her team for having invited me. Thank you to Vanny College. Thank you to you for being present. And I look forward to any and all questions. There's nothing that you can't ask me.
Thank you so much,
Already.
Nina. That was such a wonderful talk. And I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure. Yeah, it's really lovely to feel your presence here with us, even through the screen. So if anyone has any questions, I can come to you with the mic so that everyone can hear it. Sure.
Don't be shy.
Okay, you can hear me?
Ah.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for coming to speak to us. I noticed throughout your presentation, you made a very sharp distinguishment between, your people and Canadians. And I thought, like, when you were talking about culture and you're reclaiming your identity, for you, what will it take for, Canadians and who you've defined as your people to be one, to be united, and to live together?
That's a good question. I think that we already do live together. Who's our Director General and the cabinet? Or Governor General? It's Mary Simon. I do make a distinction because there is a distinction to be made. That doesn't mean that we can't live together alongside each other. I think that for the longest time, as Indigenous people, we've been, people have tried to erase us from history. And I think right now, reconciliation is about giving us space to be who we are, to give us stop taking our children away, give us enough housing to house ourselves, make sure that there's running water in our communities that we can drink, stop killing our women and trafficking our women. I think that when all those things are really addressed and taken care of, I mean, there's going to be social issues along the way, but I think that, living as one is erasing whose territory you're on. And I think that also there's this utopian kind of not our way. But our way does not mean to exclude each other or ignore each other. Rather, that we walk side by side with each of our strengths and skills and gifts that we've been given to walk on this earth without imposing each other's culture and desires and needs, and respecting each other's differences, And so if you say, well, there, I do talk as distinction, it's important to keep that distinction very clear. And that's something that I know has a visceral reaction. I don't see color, or, we need to live as one, or we're all humanity, and I think that that's an easy thing to say as a white person, or as a non-Indigenous person, or a non-BIPOC person. And if you don't see color, then you're whitewashing everybody else. And I think that the important distinction of separating does not mean it means respecting. So I think that there is a distinction that I make. I grew up in the white world, but mind you, even that, my mother was from the Philippines. So I know how to walk in both worlds. I can speak long words to fit in with university students and university professors, but I can also speak using more country-based and land-based wording when I'm around Indigenous, like my community. So I think it's an important question. And there's a lot of assumptions when you ask, when can we live as one? Until all those issues, there's still a disrespect and a leaving out of who we are, and a disregard. This is our land. We're homeless. We don't have enough housing up north because our dogs were slaughtered. We were forced to go from nomadic to sedentary. That's not our way. But yet, killing off our dogs prevented us from leaving, but you're not giving us enough housing to live in. And then you're going to take our children away because our housing situation is not ideal. We can build, so it's a very interesting question that you ask. And this is the best answer that I can come up with.
Okay, there's a question from Zoom that we'll take over here.
Mm-hmm.
So it says, "Hi Nina, it's Jackie. Can you hear me, Nina?"
Yep.
Okay. Hi Jack. Hi Nina, it's Jackie. So great to see you. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the best ways settlers can support the resurgence of Indigenous arts, all forms of art.
I think that there's many ways to support. It's going to art exhibits, going to pushing for artists to receive funding. Hold on a second. Asking that Indigenous art be present in all workspaces, in educational spaces, in your, one of the things that most recently happened was Nakuset from the Native Women Shelter got a photographer to take pictures of Indigenous people, and she's just started putting them up around Montreal. They're beautiful pictures. And art installations like that, it just gives us a presence, and I think that even lobbying to get funding to make it accessible for Native artists or Indigenous artists to go to school, to learn how to create. But I think also refraining from putting what we create into boxes. Like when we go out west, there's Haida art, and it's a thing that you see the totem pole and stuff like that. And Innuit art is seen as either printmaking or carving, and that's it, or beadwork, which is all very valid, which is all, a lot of our community members have survived on that art for so long, and it's a valid way of, expressing ourselves. But I think that in this day and age, we got like digital media, we got like TikTokers that are making art. We have like Instagram, we have Facebook, we have, I don't know, I'm old, I don't know what's the new thing media wise. Like I was gonna say MySpace, but no, remember the MySpace? They Google Indigenous artists and go and support them, buy their art. A lot of the times, like beadwork, like an example is beadwork. So I have earrings that my friend made, and it took her 2 days, full working days, and like when I work as an Indigenous, as a frontline worker, I make what, like $300 in 2 days, $250 in 2 days. And she's beading full time. But yet people want to buy beadwork for like $20, $30. They don't realize that beadwork, small earring to make. But people are willing to spend $500 on a pair of Nike shoes that was made by someone overseas. You know, or Gucci, or like those red shoes with the, shoes with the red bottoms, or Louis Vuittons, or whatever they're called. I don't know. I'm old. I don't know. And I'm not bougie. I don't know. But all that is to say the how do you say the word? The contrast between what people are willing to put value on as Indigenous artists, or willing to pay for the time and effort and skill that artists do put in. And I think that to answer the question, go and support artists, look them up, go to their exhibits. We're all over the place, you know. I hope that answers your question. That's long-winded. I tend to be long-winded. The older I get, the more long-winded I get.
That's a great answer. Thank you. We have another question here.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I was curious about your tattoos because first off, they look really great, but
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I didn't hear the beginning of that. It froze for a minute.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I wanted to ask about your tribal tattoos, and because they look great, but also I want to know if there's like a specific meaning behind them.
Yeah, my tribal tattoos are also actually called tunit. So when you ask somebody, it's more of a respectful to say what are about your markings. And we don't share what our markings mean because they're personal. Like that, you know, traditionally we don't share our markings because we between us we already know. So people who look at me already know my role in life, if I'm a mother or a grandmother, depending on the region, and certain things mean certain things. And I think that there's more and more a resurgence of tunit. Women are doing more throat singing. I thank you for your question, and it's a really good way for me to teach that we don't talk about our markings. New Zealand have similar, and there's actually in the Philippines there's markings. All Indigenous people across the world have markings of their own. And I think that the interest is really, I appreciate the interest that you have in my markings. But it's also important for me to respect the guidance from the elders that what they mean is something that I need to keep for myself and my girls. So that's going to remain a mystery for you.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's time for one more question.
No, all the time, you know? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Nina. Thank you for coming to
Hi.
speak. I was wondering, and I'm sure the answer to my question might change over the next 50 or 100 years. The conciliation effort on the part of Canadians, such a recent movement and such a recent way of thinking, because I know that up until my early teens, we were literally conditioned to overlook all Indigenous culture and not even bat an eye or think a second thought about it. I was wondering, to what extent are you now comfortable with sharing Indigenous culture, or what that would look like for non-Indigenous peoples, not necessarily adopting your habits or anything, but like propagating your culture and spreading it as much as you would be comfortable with?
One of the things that it was a journey to find out who I was to begin with. I think that took a long time, and to be really comfortable in my own skin. I I love sharing. I don't know if you could tell, but I love sharing my journey because I've done a lot of healing, and my intention through sharing my to is to really show who I am, and certain parts of our history that are not being taught, but also um, just show how contemporary we are. And I think that, I have very visceral reactions to, sage and whatever being sold. And there's people that want to do sweat lodges, and I don't agree necessarily. And different elders will tell you different things. There's like white people charging, $1,000 to have, and don't have the traditional teachings. People die in the sweat lodge. There are, people that want to make regalia and dance at powwows, and what they don't realize is that the regalia that we have is a process that each dancer goes through and has an elder to follow them with, and everything has a meaning. So I think, it's like, can we just have a minute to heal from going to jail for being who we are? And I'm not saying that we're all constantly, that is safe to do songs and singing, and and everything else was taken away from me. Like, I don't even speak my language. So it's like, just be patient, and as non-Indigenous people, to just let us have the space to be who we are without, because one of the things is, like, I had a conversation with someone recently, and people are like, well, I love Inuit throat singing, and I'm a singer, and I do opera singing, and one of the ways that I want to say and celebrate who you are, Inuit way of respecting who we are. Everything is about copying and photocopying and remaking and redigitalizing, and there was, like, during the 80s or 90s, like, everyone wanted to do yoga, and that in and of itself is something that's ceremonial. There's like things are very a la mode. If there's a celebrity on TikTok doing something, then regardless of whose culture it is, all of a sudden everybody wants that, or everybody wants this, or everyone wants to burn sage, or everyone mindset of awareness. Like, even as Inuit and as Dene woman, I will not sing a Mohawk song. As much as I love Mohawk songs, unless an elder tells me you have the right. Even as an Indigenous woman, like, I went to Vanier a couple of years ago for International Day, and they had different cultures, and I was getting someone was doing henna on my hand, and it was, I was talking to the artist, the young woman who was doing it, and I said, even me doing this, I feel like I'm culturally. And we had a conversation about that. She said, I can't remember exactly, but it was along the lines of, yeah, thank you for acknowledging that, because, everyone's doing henna now. So it's just about having those conversations in space. So it's 3:50. So I don't know if we have time for one more, or.
Yeah, I think we have to wrap up now, do we?
Well, I mean, can you guys leave? Are you okay to stay for another few minutes? I mean, people who need to go can go, and then this young person can ask their question. Nina, are you
Okay.
okay? Or do you have the stamina to go for one more?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But be quiet, you guys, as you're leaving, okay? Please.
Yeah, so just to let you know, Nina, a few people are leaving because they have a class. So
Thank you
it's-
for being
we don't
here.
want
Thank
to
you for
stick around.
coming.
But yeah, we'll take one more
Thank
question
you.
if you're able to stay.
Yep.
Thank you for coming and sharing with us. You just mentioned that how the internet culture went from like igloo to internet very quickly. And I was just wondering if throat singing was kind of the bridge for you between contemporary and like traditional, or how did you perceive it? Did it fit in one or the other, or like, is it a bridge, or yeah, thanks.
You froze for a second. What was the last part? About throat singing being contemporary?
Whether throat singing is like a bridge for you between contemporary,
Mhm.
traditional, or one or the other, or yeah.
That you totally got that, because it absolutely is a way for me to bring something like something traditional that's been part of who we are for thousands of years into the present, and it be a bridge for me to gently talk about who we are as people now. You know, even my perspective as an Inuk woman and as a Dene woman is not the only perception. So the same as all the other hundreds of women who do throat sing. So another thing too is that I'm sharing my journey, and it's unique in it, but our history is similar. The history that I share is similar, but my experience and how I feel about things is mine. And I do not represent all Inuit women. I do not represent all Dene women. But I do hold the knowledge of many who have shared with me their journey. So that has shaped how I see things. And so throat singing for me, I have been given permission to sing with digital Montreal Symphony Orchestra because we are contemporary. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much. I know that I speak for everyone here to say that we're so honored to have had the opportunity to hear from you, Nina. So thanks so much. I also want to mention for the Vanier students here, if you're not aware of the Indigenous Studies major, that's a really great way to engage more with Indigenous culture and histories and so on. So feel free to look that up, or you can come talk to me right now if you want. Thank you so much, Nina.
If you
Nina, I just want to take the chance to tell you that, you know, from last year when you came to speak in my class, in my 2 classes, the students I run into from last semester still tell me that that was the highlight of their semester. And I had students here today who heard you last semester and who wanted to come, and they weren't brought by their teacher, but they came happily to see and hear you again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that touches me a lot. Please tell them it touches me a lot if they're not there. Thank you so much for
They
coming and being a part.
I will certainly pass on the message. Thank you, Nina. All the very best. Bye-bye.
And I look forward to seeing you guys in person.